happy Wednesday. Dead Girl here, coming at you tonight from YouTube. Wanted to first and foremost say thank you guys for making the transition and hopping over with us. Tonight I've got a very special guest. She's fantastic. I'm a big fan. I know lots of you are. Join me in welcoming Kaci, better known as the Homicidal Homemaker.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for coming on. Now, I know most people, I would think, would know who you are and what you do and all of the amazing things that you create. So for those that are not familiar, would you mind just giving like a brief little tidbit about you?
Well, my name's Kaci, and in a nutshell, I make gross looking but delicious tasting food. and it all started where I wanted to be the person that made the grossest looking dish at a Halloween party. And so it all started way back in the day of MySpace. I wanted to. I was in college, and it started as a little hobby. I made a MySpace page and just started making these gross-looking creations. I would take them to friends' movie nights. I, at the time, had started horror hosting in my area,
Nice.
and I would take them to my movie nights. And I started a little MySpace page just sharing my creations, and people really started just showing an interest in them and asked if I had recipes. I never thought really anybody would have an interest in trying them for one, and let alone making them. So really, that's how the idea started about sharing the recipes, was just people on MySpace were interested in making them.
Nice.
And I started sharing them, and immediately people actually did start making the recipes. And that's where the idea of the Homicidal Homemaker blog was born.
Nice.
And I really never thought that it would last more than a couple months. That was more than a decade ago. I never thought I'd still be doing it. And from there, it turned into a horror-themed cooking show. It later became a column in Rue Morgue magazine. It's streaming on the Screambox platform, which is kind of like Netflix for horror movies.
Yes.
And it's also a Roku channel. It's on Amazon Fire TV. So I've kind of dabbled in a lot of different things. It's just been a really fun creative outlet for me, and really a journey of personal growth, because I never ever would have thought that I'm an incredibly shy individual, and I never thought that I'd see myself on hosting a cooking show. I couldn't even give a speech in front of a classroom of like 15 people. So to think that have a show that's like on YouTube and things like that, it's something I never saw myself doing. So I have a lot of fun doing it, and it's awesome to see so many people making the recipes and seeing how it really inspires them to utilize their creative sides.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And it's so much fun because you're one of I haven't seen anybody that does anything remotely near what you do with the recipes and even the show and some of like the fun skits and things that you do before and at the end. So it's extremely entertaining, and it's very, oh, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, I don't cook, but it makes me really want to start baking and cooking and creating things more.
Well, that's like the best compliment, because that's really what it's all about. Like, it's about encouraging other people, because when I was new to cooking, it was always really discouraging for me when I would make a recipe and it would not turn out. And either that may have been user error, or it may have been a bad recipe.
Right.
So it's really encouraging for me to hear that, someone who may not cook a lot, or someone who may be new to cooking, that they're seeing the episodes, or they may be seeing the recipes that may not have an episode, like the ones that are just blog only recipes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's inspiring them to, want to get cooking. That's really what it's all about. I try to make the recipes very easy to do. I try to keep them inexpensive. It's not fun to, have to buy a bunch of supplies or a bunch of ingredients for one recipe. So that's always something I'm mindful of. A lot of people that make the recipes or that watch the show, they're cooking with their children, or they are children themselves and they're learning to cook. I've had several people at conventions come because their kids found out I was going to be there.
Aww.
And they told me that they want to go to culinary school because of me. And I'm like, okay, well, I hope that you learn to actually make better food than I make if you're going to go to culinary school. I hope that you go beyond zombie fingers and brain macaroni salad, because that's super cool that just to think that they watched me making this gross looking food, and now that they have like this interest in a career. Because like for me, it was like Julia Childs and Yan Can Cook,
Oh
which
my God,
they
yes.
probably would look at my food and be horrified. Like not in the way that I intend for people to be horrified, by the way, but you know, like, but that's just like, that's what it's all about, is like encouraging and inspiring people. So that's awesome to hear.
Yay! Well, thank you. Thank you for bringing your amazingly gory recipes to everyone on the internet, basically, and beyond. You have such a very, like, a beautifully unique look about you. How did you come up with your aesthetic for just your daily dress wear as well as the show?
Well, thank you very much. I'm blushing a little bit. As I mentioned, I'm very shy. I get embarrassed very easily. Um, so I have an interest in, you know, vintage style, vintage aesthetic. I'm very much into 80s culture. I'm a child of the 80s. So
Me
I
too.
really, yeah, that's what it's all about. 80s movies, 80s music, 80s fashion. But you know, being a child of the 80s, I also did spend a lot of time at my great grandparents' house. So it's also very nostalgic for me to look at mid-century decor and
Hmm.
aesthetic, because I also grew up around that. So while I grew up in the 80s, I also I grew up around things that were from the 50s and 60s. So um, I have like this hybrid of like 50s, 60s, 80s nostalgia that, you know, for me, that's what reminds me of childhood. That's what feels
Yeah.
like home to me. And so I also grew up like watching, my great grandparents didn't have cable.
Okay.
So while I would watch MTV and watch all of like the cable 80s, you know, movies that were
Mm-hmm.
popular at the time, and rent movies, when I'd be at my own house, when I'd be at my great grandparents' house, I'd watch reruns of like the Munsters, and I'd watch the Addams Family, or I'd watch like Gilligan's Island, and you know, reruns of older shows. So that's what's nostalgic to me. So I feel like everything with my personal style comes from that. And
Yeah.
I've always been a bit of an advertising geek. I've always gotten a kick out of like vintage typography and
Mm-hmm.
vintage adverts. I remember my great grandmother would like take pictures out, and she would like take old advertisements or like cereal boxes and cut them like to back the pictures, like to keep them so they wouldn't slide around in the frames. And I
Oh,
remember
nice.
one was from a Rice Krispies like cereal box,
Yeah.
and it was from like the 60s. And I
Oh,
remember like, oh
wow.
my gosh, and like being blown away because it was like just a fraction of the box, but it had like this old artwork on it. And I remember just being like blown away. And I remember going to an antique store and seeing like what the original like Barbie dream house looked like, which was made out of paper, and
Yes.
seeing like what the first Barbie looked like. And so I was fascinated by that stuff and like old packaging. And so I feel like everything that I'm into now, it really just stems from childhood and all of the things that I grew up with. And so fashion, you know, a lot of my personal style, it does come from the 80s and the 50s and 60s. And so with the Homicidal Homemaker, I took just, you know, my own personal interests and amplified them a little
Mm-hmm.
bit, you know, for the persona of the Homicidal Homemaker. So a lot of like the fashion, well, not even a lot of it, all of the fashion and all of like the aprons and all of the decor that you see is stuff that I already owned.
Oh,
So
okay.
a lot of people, they think that maybe it's a way that I dress up, but then they'll see me out grocery shopping, which is kind of it still kind of surprises me. Well, I'll be grocery shopping and someone will like come up and they're like, "Are you the Homicidal Homemaker?" Which kind of catches me off guard, because I don't really ever expect anyone to ever, for one, recognize me, or two, like especially in my hometown, which is very small, I just don't
Ah.
really ever expect it ever. Even at like a horror convention where I know that's like the demographic of my
Mm-hmm.
audience, I still never expect it. I always go into that thinking that no one's ever going to like have seen what I do. So it always catches me off guard a little bit. And you know, I've gone into like Dollar General before, and this guy's like, "Hey, you're the lady that made the gross food on the news." Because I'll go on like to the local news and like around Halloween and make like Halloween themed dishes, which,
Nice.
people are waking up to have their morning coffee and get the news. And then here I am like, hey, I'm making this macaroni salad that looks like a brain. And they're probably just like, what the heck is wrong with her? But so, yeah, that's really like, they don't expect that it's like not a costume, not to sound like I'm quoting Return of the Living Dead or anything, like, but like, that's really like,
It's a way of life.
yeah, it's like things that I'm already into. So it was very easy for me to like take things that I'm into. It's just amplified a bit. I mean, obviously I'm not homicidal. I don't actually kill people. Sorry to, to disappoint anybody, but
Sorry, guys.
I don't actually murder anybody. But, that's really where like the persona came from. And so, and with all of the design and all of like the assets and the marketing, it all stemmed from, vintage design. It all came from like vintage, looking at, I own so many. I'm an advertising geek. That's actually what I went into. That's actually what I did as a profession.
Oh,
My
nice.
background is in marketing and advertising. Worked for an ad agency, different ad agencies for about 12 years professionally.
Oh, wow.
So really that's where it all just, I took all of the things that I do and kind of, they all manifested into this. And like I said, it was a hobby that I never thought would last more than a few months. I never thought that it would turn into a career for me. So it kind of, it's still a surprise to me a little bit.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I mean, I'm sure it's, especially when, around Halloween time, everybody's looking for those spooky and fun recipes. So, of course, I'm sure you get like flooded even more around that time. But not even thinking about it and doing it and then realizing that people are in it for the long haul. Like, they enjoy it. They love it. They love to see what you come up with. And you come up with some fantastic recipes that not only, some of them, they look a little gross and that's fine, but some of them are like super cute, like just to kind of show folks what we're talking about. Two of my favorites, which are some of the cookies that you've done.
Oh, thank you. I have so much fun doing those. Those are always a bit of a little challenge for me. I always go into them thinking that that I won't be able to pull them off. And I think that's why I have fun doing them, because I always think that I can't do them. And, I have been going through a bit of a hand injury for the past couple of years. I did have some tendon problems in my hand. So,
oh no, I'm sorry.
Well, I'm over it now. So everything's cool now. But like for a while, it was very disheartening because I felt that I wasn't able to do things as well as I could before. So to see that I could still do some things with an injured hand, it was rewarding for me. Like, especially on the creature cookies, I was like, man, my hand was so hurt and I still pulled these off. I can't believe it. So it was really cool for me. And it was motivating to see that I could still do some things even with my hand injured.
Yeah.
And I also hadn't decorated cookies for a really long time. Like time is always an issue for me. I always feel like that's always the problem. Like, that's why I haven't been able to do as much as I want to do, as there's always time is always the problem. And I think that's like for any creator, they always just wish that they had more hours in a day and that they didn't have to sleep or do any of the things that they need to do.
Time is never on your side, is it?
It never is. I just wish that I could be a vampire. So
then you have all the time. You don't need to worry about anything except daylight, which, it's fine.
Yeah,
it's overrated.
And I avoid that anyway, so.
Same here. I understand.
So on the cookies, I hadn't picked up, I had this airbrush that a friend had given me because she never used it. And she gave it to me and it sat there for a long time. I always wanted a cake and cookie airbrush. It sat there for a long time. I never used it. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to give it a try. So those Preacher cookies, the Ben Cooper Creature mask cookies, that was the first time I ever used my cake and cookie airbrush.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't know how to use it. I bought some airbrush colors and I'm like, let's just give it a whirl. And I was super proud of how they turned out. I didn't think that they were going to turn out, and with a hand that wasn't working really how I wanted it to. And as an artist, that was very it sucked. It sucked to have my hand not work how I wanted it to.
Yeah.
And so that was cool to see how those turned out. And I didn't think anyone was going to like them. I was like, oh, they're probably going to think like, oh, these suck, you know?
They're
And so I put them on.
amazing. Oh my
And that,
goodness.
I'm like that with everything that I do. I'm like, no one's going to care. Like, it's just how I've always been.
You're your own worst critic.
I always think that like nobody's going to care about anything and no one's going to like it. I've always been that way. And I posted them and I didn't look at my social media. And then when I looked at my phone, I thought something was wrong because there was all these alerts. And I'm like, really? Like nothing that I do ever gets that many likes. I was really, really shocked. And so it really motivated me to keep doing. And so I did the They Live cookies, and I did not think that I was going to pull those off. Like I got the idea in my head and I'm like, there's no way these are going to turn out. And I would like to try to do them again. And, you know, there's some things that I'd like to improve on, but I didn't think they'd come out as well as they did.
I mean, look at the eyes. The eyes are insane. Like that alone, I was like, oh my God, I am never be on that level in a million years. So like the detail that you've got in them is just, it's amazing. I don't know how you'd improve on them, be honest with you.
Thank you. That was only my second time with the airbrush too. So like when I go back and I look and I like see how much better that I've gotten with it and learned how to control it a little bit better. Like, and that's a recommendation that I have for anyone who's doing anything creative, anything, whether that's writing, if that's drawing, that's sculpting, like just anything that you're doing. And this is advice that someone gave to me when I was a teenager, a musician that I admire very much. He told me that he's embarrassed when he listens to his first album. And he said that every time he plays, he's automatically better. So I always think of that, like even to this day, this is 20 years ago, like more than 20 years ago, he told me that. And I always think of this still. So I always go back and I look at it and I'm like, you never realize how you've progressed till you go back and look at the other stuff. Because sometimes I think every creator goes through that where they think they're not progressing, or they'll have that moment like, what am I doing with my life? Or is this for anything? Does anybody care? Am I getting better? You know,
right. You feel like you're stuck in that same spot, and then you go back and you look at, you know, earlier stuff and you're like, oh my God, I got so much better.
Yeah. And I had a teacher once in college. He's like, because I would like be drawing something and I would just like crumble it up like 3/4 of the way through, and I'd be like 8 hours into it.
Wow.
And he's like, what is wrong with you? I'm like, it's not good. And he's like, well, I guess it's better than thinking everything you do is precious, but you had a lot of good work into that. I'm like, no, I can do better, you know? And that's just, I would push myself in maybe an unhealthy way, but it was the only way that I could challenge myself. And I ended up probably hurting myself a little bit more than helping myself in some ways, because I had a lot of sleepless nights, but I got better from it. Like I challenged myself a little bit more. So I probably could have just slid by and done okay, but I learned a lot from it. So,
well, that's good. That's important too.
I don't recommend anyone do what I did. You know, maybe I have a little bit of a problem with that. Like, you know, going into like 8 hours into a drawing, you know, starting over. I don't recommend anyone doing that. I don't know what my deal was. Dumb kid.
It happens though. I have plenty of friends who are artists, and from that standpoint, they're their own worst critics. And I'm like, I look at it from the outside, I'm like, this is amazing. And they absolutely, you know, hate it and aren't happy with it. So it's just, I think that you guys, and I lump you in with that category because you are an artist, that you guys are kind of your own worst enemy in a way, because the things that you make are amazing.
I think, and I do agree with that, because there's times where like I could have just done it and it would have been fine and I would have gotten the passing grade in the class, but then I did something and then I ended up pulling an all-nighter and then like feeling sick and then having to go to the final and maybe not doing my best at that. But it all worked out in the end. And like one thing in particular, like I can think of, I crumpled up a drawing that I did, or I got mad about it, you know, did something stupid and wiped out the drawing. Thought I'd start over, realized I didn't have any of the paper that I needed to do the final project on left.
No.
And I was like, okay, what do I have? Or maybe it wasn't a final, it was like just an assignment. And I'm like, okay, I have some Arches Aquarel, which is a thick watercolor paper. And I'm like, okay, I'm just going to work with what I have. I turned the assignment in. The teacher's like, why is it on that paper? I'm like, because it's all I had. And I said I didn't have money to go get it, but really it was like 2 a.m. and there was no way that I could go get a piece of paper.
Yeah.
And there were no stores locally that sold it. I had to go like an hour away to get it.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. So even if there were any stores open, like locally, I wouldn't have been able to get it. So I drew it, and it ended up being the best piece I ever did that semester. It ended up being in the student show.
Oh, wow.
He told me, I don't know how you drew on that paper, because I've tried doing it when I ran out of paper, and I don't know how you did it because the texture on it's so heavy. And I'm just like, I don't know how I did it. I'm thinking because I panicked and I worked with what I had. But
you don't need to know all that.
Yeah. So I'm anyone listening to this, I'm not recommending this as advice, but I'm just saying that, like, it's not advice, but sometimes in that moment of sheer panic, if you work with what you have, sometimes it does work out.
Sometimes it pans out.
Sometimes it doesn't too.
Now, you've got all kinds of recipes online, between like the cookies and breads. You even have the soul pizza from Nightmare on Elm Street, which is one of my favorite things. And number one, it was so much fun to watch you do it. And it touched my heart somewhere deep down in the blackness to see that pizza come to life. I was so happy, and I'm like, I kind of want to go get pizza crust and pizza dough and try this now. What kind of clicked where you were like, I need to make this?
Well, I always try to, like, when I'm watching movies or like trying to draw inspiration, sometimes it's always the obvious is look for a food reference in a movie.
Right.
And, there's tons of them in horror movies.
Yes.
But sometimes it's not so obvious. Sometimes I'm looking at things and I'm like, well, how can I turn that into food too? Obvious ones are like the stuff.
Yes.
The live custard, a lot of things I've already touched on. The poltergeist steak.
The steak, that was fabulous.
But I mean, it's like too easy to make a steak, and I'm a vegetarian too, so I didn't want to just like make a steak and fried chicken. And a lot of people that do follow me are also vegetarians.
Okay.
So I'm like, well, what could I make that's like, I don't know, it's just too easy to make a steak. Like, I don't want to just make a steak and put like orzo pasta on it for maggots, or something or on the chicken. And so I'm like, okay, well, what if we made like a red velvet fudge that looked like a steak? Because then other people that maybe aren't into poltergeist, they could still make it for like an April Fool's Day joke or for something. So I always try to like think of other ways that people could still utilize the recipe, maybe if they're not into horror. Yeah. So that's another thing that comes into mind. But like on the soul pizza, I'm like, that's so gross. And I mean, I know that like, he's like, Rick, you little meatball, and it's obvious to do the meatball, but when I tried to do like actual like ground beef or a meat substitute, they didn't have the detail of the face like I intended because it shrunk up. So I'm like, I want them to have the faces and really like have that screaming look. So that's why I went with the Velveeta. And so many kids, like, I knew that kids would want to make it with their parents. And that was one of the earlier episodes. And I didn't want to, on the earlier episodes, dive right in with like super hard to make recipes because I knew that it would turn people off from making them, which is why on the first few, I tried to do some easier ones. I wanted to like really like ease people into it. It's not going to be fun for people to like the first episode do something like super in depth. Like if I did the red rum roll cake right off the bat, I think I would have lost people. So that's why I tried to like do these really easy ones, and I got some flack for it, which I knew that I would. Like people would say like, this isn't real cooking, and why are you using Velveeta, or why are you using hot dogs? You don't know how to cook. And I'm like, whatever, don't make them then.
Don't make it, don't eat it, it's fine.
It's intended to be like party food or easy things, or for people that are learning how to cook or may not know how to cook, and it is what it is. And you know what? A lot of people have made those recipes. Those were popular recipes on my blog, which is why I made them on the channel first, because it was a blog for so many years before. So on the soul pizza, it just made sense to turn it into an actual food. And it was so gross to actually like watch the movie because I've seen the movie so many times, but
Right.
like when we go for inspiration on
Like,
the
pause
episodes,
it.
we watch it over and over again. Like, well, how can we turn that into a little scene on the episode?
Yeah.
And that's a really fun part for us too, is to try to like put that into the little universe of the show. It really does suck up a lot of our time. I don't know like how much more we'll be doing that in the future of the episodes, maybe for some of the bigger ones.
Yeah.
Because like, not to give too much of a spoiler, but from here on out, once like we're COVID safe and everything, which I'm vaccinated, so, and
Yay!
some of the team is now vaccinated, so we're hoping, you know, once I'm fully moved in, that we can resume production again. So we're super excited on that.
Good.
We're going to focus just more on producing the content and getting it out there. And then on some of the bigger episodes, doing more of like the skits and everything. Because I do know that people love them, but they really just want more of the recipes and the tutorials more than anything.
Yeah.
So on that Freddy one, we're like, what can we do? We got to have Freddy pranking us. And we're like, got to have him call the Craven Diner. So like, it was so silly. And I'm like, we got to have like him call on an old like 80s light up phone. Yeah. None of us have, we don't have landlines. Like none of us do. So we actually couldn't get the phone working, which is like pretty funny. Like if you notice, it's not actually like functioning at the beginning. So like Freddy calls and he's like dialing it. And no one's ever actually noticed the number that he's dialing. So I'll let everybody go back and look at that. It might be kind of hard to tell with the claw, but it's a nod to a horror movie. With something evil in the title, so hint hint.
Okay. I already know.
It might be kind of hard to tell because of the claw, but that episode was super fun. So you know, on that, it was just like, it's so gross, and I know so many people were disgusted and wouldn't eat pizza because of that scene alone.
I literally just had somebody in the chat saying that. He's like, I couldn't eat pizza with sausage on it for years because it was just, no, I couldn't do it. I enjoyed the scene, and I ate pizza while watching it.
And that, like, for that reason, I really wanted to make it meatball, and I have been reworking that recipe. So that's another thing. Like, a lot of these recipes I've already done. Like, I'm constantly always thinking of ways to, like, revamp them and rework them a little bit. So that one's being reworked on a little bit more of a gourmet version and a homemade version. I did like a pre-made crust because, again, I was just trying to really encourage people just to get going in the kitchen. And that one, I cannot believe how many people have made it. I even had, this is the coolest thing. There was a girl, she was doing her engagement photos, and the theme was the man of my dreams. And so she wore a red and green like pinup style dress, and then her fiance dressed as Freddy. And they did a picnic, and they made that pizza as a prop for their engagement photos. And I shared it on my Facebook, but this was probably like 5 or 6 years ago. So you'd have to, you know,
really dig
through the photos for a while. But that was pretty cool that like something I created ended up being like this prop in their engagement photos. So that was pretty rad.
That's awesome. And that's a good couple right there. Anybody that does awesome horror engagement photos, immediate winner in my book. That's for sure.
Yeah, that was super cool.
Now, you've come up with tons of stuff, like with drinks and like treats and all kinds of things. So what's one of your favorite recipes that you've made and you love it, you're in love with it, and you don't want to like tweak anything with it? Do you have one even?
Oh, there's a few. Okay. I'm going to say 3. There's like 3 of them.
Okay.
The Twin Peaks Black Lodge pie.
So that video, by the way, good job on Agent Cooper impersonation. I loved it so much. I go back and I rewatch it periodically, and I'm like, this is just fabulous. I can't.
I hope Kyle MacLachlan sees it someday. Everybody kept tagging me. He did this thing on Twin Peaks Day this year on TikTok where he said, show me you're a Twin Peaks fan without telling me you're a Twin Peaks fan. And everyone keeps tagging me in it. I have not had the time. I want to try to edit down my videos like into a TikTok format and see what I can do. I was thinking about just like doing the part where like I smash Leo at the end of the episode where I smash his face into the pie. But Oh my gosh, I'm glad you liked that episode, because
It was so good.
that was our second ever episode, and probably one of the most fun that we've ever shot, and one of the most delicious pies that I think I've ever had.
Okay.
My producer Ian, he says still that is like his favorite thing that I've ever made. He's
Aw.
not big on sweets, to be honest.
Okay.
And we destroyed an entire pie, like three of us. We ate like the whole thing. And so a lot of times, like when I'm making a recipe, like because there's a lot of like cooling involved for some of them, like I'll make like a custard pie and then it has to set up. A lot of times I'll make a whole one so we don't have to wait. So I'll have one ready to go, kind of like the whole Food Network magic, it's done.
Yeah.
Open
2 minutes later, here you go.
Yeah. So we'll end up with like 3 full recipes of something, and we're like, gosh, what are we gonna do with all of this pie? No, we handled that.
It was gone.
That's why a lot of the times, like a lot of my friends are like, hey, do you need any helpers, or do you need any extras on set? Because they all get fed really well.
I was going to say, they all want to be taste testers, if you ever need guinea pigs.
Yeah. And that pie, I did have some left over, because we had like 3 of them. I gave one to a friend, and she's like, I don't know what you put in that pie, but like that pie was like cracked. She's like, what was that? And I'm like, it was the Black Lodge pie. And she's like, well, what's the recipe? I'm like, if you go to the homicidalhomemaker.com, I'm like typing it out.
It's all right there.
Yeah. So that pie, so many people have made that. Like I've had people tell me that like, they're like, yeah, my mom has no idea what Twin Peaks is. So I didn't do any of like the chevron crust, but I made it with just like the cherry pie filling on top. And I take it every Mother's Day now. So like all these people have told me it's like their mom's favorite pie, and like hundreds of people have made that recipe, and that's really cool. And one of the reasons that I'd say that's probably like my top favorite, I actually took that to Sinister Creature Con in Sacramento with me. I did little mini ones, and I took one to Ray Wise and Cheryl Lee. And nice. I was so terrified. I was so scared to talk to them, because it was like, oh my gosh, it's Leland and Laura Palmer. And I don't really get that scared to talk to people, but and I didn't really get scared until like I gave them the pie, and then it was like, oh, I made you this pie, and I felt really stupid,
Aww.
And I wouldn't take a pie from some stranger, but I'm like, oh, I'm a guest here too, and here's my card, so they wouldn't know I was some weirdo or anything like that.
Right off the street, like, here, eat my pie.
I didn't actually expect them to eat it. So like the next day, I'm actually over at Joe Bob's table, because I'm a huge Joe Bob fan.
Oh, we're going to talk about that too.
Yeah. huge Joe Bob fan. And so I'm over at his table, probably like being a super fan girl, and walking around, and after that, and my friend's watching my table for me, and he's like calling, and he's like, you need to come back. And I'm like, why? And he's like, well, someone from the con came over, and they're saying that Cheryl Lee asked if you could come over to her table, that she's looking for you. And I'm just like, what? And so I got like really like freaked out. I'm like, she must have tried my pie. And I went over there, and she's like, she gives me a hug, and she's like, aside from my grandmother's pie, that was the best pie that I've ever had. I like started crying.
Oh, girl.
Like I cry super easily. Like when I'm happy, if you show me like, someone sent me a video of like a baby hippo taking a bath, and I like started crying over that. Aww. Like I just like, I'm a super sap about like cute things, and like, yeah. So I was like, oh my gosh, like I couldn't believe it. And then she told me like, she's like, Ray picked up the whole thing, because it was a little pie, like a little tart. She's like, he picked up the whole thing and like just ate it last night. So they loved it. And then he told me, he's like, that pie was awesome. So Twin Peaks cast member approved. And then a follower of mine, Holly Lehman Tyler, she actually has made the pie too, and taken it to Days of the Dead and given it to some of the cast. And so she sent me pictures of them eating it. So Twin Peaks cast member approved recipe. So that was pretty rad. And then, not to go on anymore about that question, but my second favorite's the red rum roll cake, and my third is the stuff no bake marshmallow cheesecake with my chocolate chip Charlie crust.
And that just makes me want to go to Publix and buy, which is our grocery store, and buy all of the things so that I can just bake all of the things. because, oh my goodness.
And the stuff one was one that I had that and the red rum roll cake up my sleeve for a really long time. We were trying to get some special guests for the episode, which is why they got put on hold for so long, but it just didn't really pan out. There was an actress and a model that I have communicated with online. She really wanted to be on an episode, but she had so many irons in the fire, and we were just trying to hold out, and it just didn't work out. So we ended up filming that eventually, but it worked out in the end because it gave me some time to really work out the recipes even more, and they came out so much better. So like I think the stuffed cheesecake, that was like version 4 of it. Even though like I've tried out like recipes before and I'm like, okay, I've done it like 6 times. That one's perfect. I'm going to do it. Well, I did it like 4 more times. And version 4 is the one that got put on the channel, and I'm happiest with that one. So
does your cat or your team, do they get to kind of taste test them with you when you're in that process, or is that just kind of like all you?
My family mostly. So my family and then usually the crew, they get to have the final results of it.
That's awesome. I'm sure your family's very happy when you're like, hey, I made a new thing. Here, try this.
They love it. They love it. Especially like on the Dead Alive custard. They got to try like every version of that. There were a lot of versions of that, and they loved every single one of them, but the last one was the best one.
And that's such a fun, I love that you went with the custard. I love it so much because the first time I saw that movie, I was like, all right, Peter Jackson, Lord of the Rings, let's go. And I got so into it, and it's one of my all-time favorite movies now, and it's been for years. And the custard scene, every time, I'm just like, it doesn't matter. You still cringe a little bit because you know it's coming. You know what's going to happen even before it does, and you're like, oh, God, no. And then it happens. So the fact that you have a recipe for that custard and you have the ear and the earring and everything is sheer perfection.
And my crew, like, some of them, like Ian, my producer, he's like, I'm sorry, it tastes good, but I cannot eat it because we had watched the scene so many times because, like, I don't know if you saw the end of the episode, but we wanted to do a little nod. So, like, we made it like, you know, the Sumatran rat monkey, a bit my friend Evan, and then, like, the whole crew gets zombified. And then, you know, we wanted to do a nod to, like, you know, the mom where, you know, the
dinner scene.
The pus comes out of her arm, but then we wanted to make it a hybrid with the zombies in the basement, you know, eating, you know, having their dinner. So we kind of like merged those into our own little scene. And after just watching that, he's like, I can't eat it. It tastes delicious. I'm sorry. and like all the little things that like go into it. I don't think people realize, like, we're such a small crew. Like, we're so DIY, like, on all of that. Like the little spray that's coming out of, I think it comes out of Evan's arm. Yeah, because he's the one that gets bit on the episode, and then like he tries to take someone else's. I think he tries to take Salvador's custard, and then he gets stabbed or something. I'd have to go back and watch the episode on who stabs who now, but we have his wound sprays out something. Well, we actually were trying to do practical effects, so I'm under a cloth, and I have a big syringe full of the actual strawberry syrup with some tubing that I got from the pet store. And so I'm pumping it through there and actually trying to get it to spray into the custard dish because we wanted practical effects on it. And it was just going every direction except where
you needed it to be.
And then it actually lands in there, and we're like, we got it. And then we watch, and it's out of focus because we're trying to like follow it.
Oh no!
And so we get it, and then it was not working out. We ended up having to do CGI on that part, but like we spent so much time trying to get that ding blood pus coming out of it, and so I don't think people realize like all of the little silly things that we do.
Like how much time it actually takes to do, even if you can get it.
Yeah, for real. And people are like, oh, like at cons, they're like, so what do you do? Like when I'm telling them about the show, they're like, oh, so you just like host the show? I'm like, well, no. And so I tell them, like, I create all the recipes, like I brainstorm them, and then I, you know, develop the recipe. I test it out sometimes like 6 to 8 times, sometimes for a recipe. And, you know, I buy all of the ingredients, I test it out, develop them, I actually put it on the website, which I maintain myself. I take all of the pictures of the recipes myself.
Oh, wow.
I write out the episodes. Salvador and I write them together. Salvador does all of the music on the show. Ian and I direct the episodes together. So we're a very small team, and we all wear a lot of hats to make it happen. But sometimes I have to do makeup. Sometimes I have to do like practical effects on there. Sometimes I'm hiding under a tablecloth pumping blood. You never know what we're gonna have to do. Or like even on our Friday the 13th episode, sometimes there's like 10 of us packed into a bathroom stall so one person can get killed in a bathroom. You just never know what you're gonna do one day. So like people, sometimes they watch the show and they think that it's like a massive crew, and some days it might be. We might have a lot of people involved, but usually it's just like our core, like 4 to 5 people, and that's that's what it is, and that's how it's possible.
Now, what's the most challenging bake that you've done or creation that you've made? Because I know you've done a lot, and I know you've also kind of created your own. I don't want molds. Is that the word I'm looking for?
Oh, yeah.
Even like with the gingerbread cookies from Krampus, I know you had to create your own mold for the gingerbread man because, it wasn't quite what you were looking for. So, I mean, factoring all of that in as well, like what's been something that's been extremely challenging that you've created?
That's a tough one. I will say that the red rum roll cake, I would say, is probably one of the more difficult ones. I think it's really just like the nature of the type of recipe it is. Sponges or like roulades or roll cakes, they're not difficult to make. They just can be finicky. Like once you've made them several times, I think that
you kind of get it down.
Yeah, you get it, and it's kind of backwards on what you're thinking, because like when you make a cake like in a sheet pan, you want to like wait for it to cool a little bit before you invert it onto a rack and let it cool.
Yeah.
But like with a roll cake, it's so thin that like 1 minute over baking it can ruin it, and it can crack. So when you want to take it out of the pan, you want to roll it up immediately. So when it's hot, it's coiled. Like you want to roll it up so it's hot and it's coiled up so it cools in that coil shape. So then when you unroll it, it doesn't have that tendency to crack. So it's very backwards. And I've had some people leave comments saying like, what are you doing? Why would you like take it out of the oven or why would you take it out of the pan when it's hot and roll it up? And I'm like, well, and why do you have so many eggs in it? And I always try to answer people, and I try to educate them, because that's the only way that you're going to learn. Like that's the only way that I've learned is from user error and asking questions and going on forums and learning from other people's mistakes. When I first started like learning how to bake, I went on like cake forums. I learned what other people did wrong. So on those, I mean, it's a little bit of a difficult one, because not only are you making an already difficult, and I don't want to say difficult because I don't want to turn people away from it.
It's finicky.
You're making something that can be finicky, yes. But then you're putting a pattern on top of it, because that pattern, it's not fondant, it's not frosting, it's baked into the dough.
Oh, wow.
And I don't want to like scare people from that too, because it's really not that hard. If you can trace a picture, then you can make that cake. And it's the same thing with like the Friday the 13th cake that I did, where you pipe all of the hockey masks on there.
Yes.
You're just making a different type of batter. And so if you really think about it in the layers, and you think about your process, and you think about getting organized, it really like breaks it down. It's a lot of steps, and it's a lot of different ingredients. But when you think about it and get organized, it's not really that difficult.
Bad.
And just pay attention to the instructions. But if you don't pay attention, that's where things can go wrong. Like pay attention to your oven temperature, and pay attention to the length of time, and pay attention when I'm saying to roll it up while it's hot and let it cool. Like there's a reason for that.
Right.
And so, there's times where I even overbaked it just a little bit when I was testing it out, and even I cracked a few of them. So I've made a lot of them, and I still screw up doing it because I get sidetracked. Like, oh, I'm trying to make this and maximize my time. Like,
gotcha.
Pay attention to things. So I would say that's probably one of the more difficult ones. And I do make a lot of like my own molds. It's something that I've been working on for a while. I've had so many irons in the fire for the past year, and especially like with the pandemic, that kind of like really put a dent in things for me.
Yeah.
I've been trying to work on my own baking line, so I've been making cookie cutters and chocolate molds,
Oh, wow.
and I do have a couple, like a tutorial for like the Krampus cookies, on how to make your own cookie cutter out of like heavy duty foil, because let's face it, there's nothing more annoying than when like you want to make something but can't find the resource that you need. So like on a cookie cutter, you can buy a pack of foil and make any cutter you want. And so that's how I came to the idea of the Krampus cookies, because I had like an obscene amount of gingerbread man cookies, but none that actually looked like the ones in the movie. And I'm like, this is not going to work. I have to make it look like the one in the movie. So, but I wouldn't say that was difficult, just a little time consuming, really.
Yeah. Just different because that resource at that time wasn't available. So you created your own, which is fantastic because there's a lot of people who are intimidated to do something like that. So it's nice that you have that tutorial out there where you're like, this is totally doable. It's not unheard of. It's something that you can you can do, and you don't have to spend a ton of money to make it.
And it's cool because that cookie cutter tutorial is probably one of the top tutorials on my website.
Oh, I don't doubt it.
From people not even trying to find like the Krampus cookies, they're just trying to find like how to make your own cookie cutter. It's like one of the top ones on there. It's crazy.
And I am not surprised. It's awesome. It's an awesome cookie. So make sure that you guys are going to the Homicidal Homemakers website and check out all the recipes and all the tutorials and all of the things. Now, you were recently given an award by Mr. Joe Bob Briggs and Darcy the Mail Girl. You are one of their Silver Bolo winners.
I still can't believe that. Like, I still like freak out when I think about it. That is like the greatest honor ever. I was making some Lone Star Beer like logo cookies while watching the episode. I watch The Last Drive-In every time it comes on. It's a huge deal for my family.
Us too.
It's been something that I look forward to. I go to my parents' house whenever there's a new episode. We watch it together. Sometimes we make snacks if time permits. That time I was like, no, I want to make some Lone Star Beer cookies, because I was just like feeling super inspired by the show. And I'm like, I've never seen Lone Star Beer cookies. I'm like, oh, I bet Joe Bob would like those. And so I was just like, I wanted to try my hand at making them. And I was my challenge was to try to make them completely vegan Lone Star Beer cookies during the episode. That was my challenge. Like during the whole episode was like to make them, decorate them, and have them done. Well, I didn't finish them because I got a little distracted after the announcement. Like I didn't even finish making them because I started screaming. So every time they announced the Silver Bolo winner, the thing that's been really awesome about it is the first ever one was Matt, Dinosaur Dracula, that I followed forever. He's like a huge inspiration of mine. His website, like I have like notifications on for his posts, like on Facebook. He's like one of the people I have like see first, because everything, like if there's ever anything like from my childhood that like I can't exactly remember, like a little fond memory, like, okay, I remember something, but it's not quite all the way there. I usually ask him about it, and he usually can unearth something, and then I can verify if it's something that I've either made up kind of or if it is really there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like sometimes you're like, is that something from a movie, or is it something, it's a little foggy.
Yeah.
But most of the time, like he can really dig something up and find it. Like for instance, the Monster Mac from McDonald's.
Oh my God.
I swore that there was a commercial for it that had a parody of the Monster Mash. I knew the burger was real because I have multiple memories of eating it and getting in trouble for not finishing it because I would beg to get it. I would like harass my mom to get it for me, and then I wouldn't eat it because it was like 4 patties. Like it was huge. like an adult couldn't even eat it now. It was so big, because I swear food was bigger back in the 80s than they make it now.
It probably, yeah. Yeah, I'm going to agree with
I
you
don't
on
know.
that.
I don't know if it's because I was smaller or if food really was a better value back then, but that burger, it really was huge. And I remember a TV spot for it, and I remember a radio spot for it.
Yeah.
And it was called the Monster Mac, and it was only around Halloween. And no one remembered it except my family and maybe like one or two people. And they were all from the Fresno, California area.
Okay.
Matt found an article. It was a test market item in 2 areas, and Fresno was one of them. So I was not imagining it.
It was real.
So Dinosaur Dracula, he was the first ever Silver Bolo winner, and he is so deserving of that. And so every episode of The Last Drive-In, when they have the Silver Bolo winner, I was so stoked for that, because not only was I hearing some of my friends' names, but there were people that I had never heard of. And so I would find new podcasts or new YouTubers to watch. And it was really exciting because it was new content and people that were working really hard, doing awesome things that I may not have been aware of otherwise.
Right.
And so I thought it was cool. And I kind of always like hoped like, oh, maybe someday I'll get one, but I didn't think I actually would. And I knew that like people had nominated me, and I'm like, oh, I hope I get one. You know, like I'd comment back like, that's so cool. Thank you. I hope, fingers crossed. I really, really didn't think I'd ever get recognized with one. So every week I'd like, you know, wait for it, and I'd try to take a picture of it and tag the person. Yeah. Sometimes it would be my friends. And so I'm sitting there and I'm recording it, and I'm like, what? Like I saw my name and I yelled out a bad word because I wasn't expecting to see my name up there. So I ruined my recording, because then my dogs proceeded to start barking, and I like the phone like went like
everything just started all at once,
and I like screamed, and the house went nuts, because like I was not expecting it at all. And I just like started screaming, and like with 4 little chihuahuas and a cat, they were like, what is wrong with you? And
what is happening?
And I didn't finish my Lone Star beer cookies because I was distracted after that point. So I'm like, okay, I didn't finish these, but here they are. And like, how appropriate though. Like it was cool, because I was trying to like make these cookies that night, and I'm like, well, so now I have like this little like memento, like, oh, this was the night I got my Silver Bolo. I didn't finish them, but here they are. And so just to be recognized by like one of my heroes that like I've, you know, watched for so long, and like he's a huge inspiration of mine. And like when he followed me on Twitter, like I figured he follows everyone back. And so I like had sent him a message, and he actually replied. I'm like, yeah, he probably just replies to everybody. But like the fact that he actually like paid attention to something that like me and my friends have worked really, really hard making. And with Darcy, I followed her for so long. They actually like checked out the episodes, and that's a huge compliment, because like, you know, I started everything that I did just like for fun, and thought like, oh, it'll be a couple months, maybe 10 people pay attention to it. And when I got like even 100 followers on Facebook, I was baffled. I'm like, I can't believe 100 people even care about this gross looking stuff that I make. Like that still like shocks me, like that anybody even cares about it, you know. Like I can't believe people want to make stuff that looks like intestines. So that's
who doesn't.
So that was a huge honor, and I actually got to meet Joe Bob. And when I went up to his table, I don't get like fear. I don't want to say fear, but it's like
you get nervous. There's like a little pit in your tummy where you're just like, I can't say anything stupid.
Yeah,
you know.
And I was like, oh, he's probably not even going to know who I am, you know, because it's like when you go up to someone, it's like I'm very socially awkward. I'm super shy. So I'm like, do I go up and be like, hi, I'm Kaci? And I walk up and he stands up. He's super tall, by the way. I'm 5'2", so I'm not very tall myself.
Oh, you're my height. Yay!
So he's like super, super tall. Everybody's tall to us.
Yes.
But he's really tall.
He's tree tall.
I'm like looking up like, oh my gosh, he's really tall. And he goes, "Oh my gosh, it's Kaci, the homicidal homemaker." And then I felt like really small and little at that moment. And I was like, he knows who I am. He recognized
He knows
me.
my name.
And I don't remember what I talked to him about, but I probably rambled on about something stupid. I probably talked about Gary Sherman and how I think Dead and Buried should be on the last drive-in, and how I think it's
yes,
it's a perfect, because I always tweet about it, so it's probably to the point where it's annoying, because I'm gonna campaign for that movie. I've even talked to Gary Sherman on Instagram, and he even said, yes, get me on there. So he even wants to be on there.
This needs to I'm with you. I will help you. Everybody watching, campaign for this. It needs to happen.
So Annoy, his name's Welcome to Potter's Bluff. He wants to be on the last drive-in. So yeah, let Shudder know. And like, he even told me who has the rights to the movie. It's the perfect drive-in movie. My parents actually saw it at a drive-in, probably awesome. before I was born. They actually, that's how I saw the movie. My parents told me, oh yeah, I saw this movie at the drive-in, and they showed it to me. And it's one of my favorite movies. So that's how I'm the horror fan that I am, is because of my parents.
That's awesome.
So
That's fantastic.
that was my Joe Bob experience, and I hope that I definitely get to meet him again, and I hope I get to go to one of his live shows, and I hope I get to meet Darcy someday too. I've never actually gotten to meet her.
She's like, we met her there's a horror convention here that we go to called Spooky Empire, and her and Joe Bob have been a couple of times, and she's like so sweet. Like, just super, super sweet. And he's, you know how he is. He's amazing anyway. The man doesn't even have to say a word, and I'm just like, I love you. But she's very sweet. But yeah, it was funny because we were watching The Last Drive-In, and then your name came up, and I was like, oh! And my husband's like, what? Do you know her? And I was like, well, not personally, but I follow her, and she does these amazing bakes, and I was showing him, and I'm like, so she's so deserving of it. That's fantastic. So I was so happy for you. So did you actually get the actual bolo? Do you have it?
I do. That's going up after I'm all moved in and everything. I definitely plan to do like a live stream or a walkthrough. So I'll have to show you like my little shadow box, because that's definitely like my prized possession. Genuine silver, spray painted by Yuki himself. So yeah, I actually got a signed certificate from Joe Bob and Darcy, and it has I'm like getting teared up thinking about it, and actually like a silver bolo. So like, that was super cool. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, I'm gonna keep working on that little shadow box, and
I really, can't wait to see it. I'm so excited for it.
I have some cool little plans. I'm making like a little like, I'm gonna 3D print like a little Ernie the dragon to put on it.
Yes. It's a little hat.
I'm gonna make him a little hat. Like, I hope it turns out. So
that's fantastic. Oh my goodness, I absolutely love it. Now I know you're like in the middle of moving right now, and I know is there anything that you're working on that you want to talk about, or anything that's coming up for you that's gonna be big?
Well, just working on that horror baking line right now. Everything's kind of boxed up right now, so I can't do that, but hopefully like in the next month, everything will start to resume with that. I did buy a house, so
congratulations.
Thank you. Everything's kind of, I felt like I hit the reset button on life about a year ago. I decided to resign from my career and decided to move from my place of residence, where I lived for like 9 years, and then moved, and now I'm moving again less than a year later. The house now is going to be my studio, though, so I won't have to drive an hour away, where I was filming at my friend's house, which was also his studio, because that was a little bit of a challenge with filming too. Yeah. So with COVID, really, that put everything on hold for the past year. I think everybody understands that and can relate to that.
Yes.
It really did give me the opportunity really to like think things over and think about the direction of what I wanted to do. I did start my own baking company. So I've been doing some stuff with that.
That's fantastic.
And so because of that, you know, that'll give me some, help me acquire some funds to really start doing more with the show, because we are a very DIY effort. You know, it comes out of pocket. We're not like a monetized YouTube channel. We're very, very, very DIY. Like all of the props you see, we make them ourselves for the most part. Like if we're going to use a prop for like one thing, we don't want to spend money on a prop. So we'd rather spend 6 hours making one if we can save, you know, $30 and make it for $3. Just waste.
Might as well.
So like the little on the Critters episode, like the Krite puppet, I made that. I'd never made a puppet in my life except out of like a paper bag. Oh my God,
he's awesome.
So I wish I would have sent you a picture of that. I know I have one somewhere where I put like bunny ears on him, but like that was just like my little inexpensive like puppet that I made for the episode, because I didn't want to spend the money on one for just having it pop out of a bush. Yeah. So I don't even remember what I was talking about now. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Your current things that you're working on and where you're at.
So, we would drive to Fresno because I'm actually outside of Fresno. So we would drive an hour away to Fresno to film. And that got a little hard, especially during the pandemic. I actually haven't seen most of my crew in a year, other than around my birthday. I saw Ian, my producer, from a car. I waved at him. He gave me some cookies for my birthday. So it's really, really been unfortunate because I miss them so much. So we've been like talking about like, this is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to film. So now that we're all like gradually starting to get vaccinated and the world's opening up again, and now that like the studio will be in my own home, it's just going to make things so much easier. We're going to be able to produce more content more frequently. And then also I'll be able to live stream on a regular basis now. So I'm hoping that I'll be able, not only just for like my patrons on Patreon, but like also just on Instagram and on Facebook. So, and on, you know, YouTube Live. So I'm hoping that that's really in the plans, is to do more like interactive live content. Awesome. I used to do a lot of gaming stuff late at night, and
listen, I game. I get it.
But here's the thing. I have no business doing it. I'm so bad. I still play the MS-DOS games that I played in like 1994. Like I use an emulator, and that's like about all I can do. So I'm sure there's probably someone on the chat who has watched me struggle late at night and laughed their butt off watching me. Like I would go on late at night and I'd be like, why is it doing this? Why can't, and I'd get stuck like on a puzzle game. Yeah. And it probably was hilarious for them to watch me like almost hysterical, like on this simple puzzle. Like, why can't I get past it? And I think someone referred to it as adorable, but they probably mean like, what is wrong with her? Like, why can't she get past it?
No, it probably was adorable. I'm going to go with the adorable side of this. All right. It was adorable.
So I used to do that like late at night, and so I might start doing that again. I used to do Jackbox streams really late at night. There's some pretty naughty language on some of those games, and some of them would get a little out of hand. So I would tend to do those at night. One time I started streaming at like 6 o'clock, and I looked and it was 8 a.m. one time. Oh, wow. We played Jackbox, and I was like, oh my gosh, we played it like all the way till morning. So I don't know if I want to do that all night, but it was really fun. So I have all of the Jackbox games, so I do want to do more of that. So I'm hoping, just now that I have like I'll have like a better place to stream and more space. I've been, I moved and then got kind of in a smaller space, and then with COVID, the renovations didn't happen in the current one that I'm in that I intended. A lot of remodeling needed to be done. Yeah. And then the world shut down. Yep. And I couldn't get anyone to do it. I didn't want anyone to come in and do it. And then, and then things happened, and now I'm moving again. So it all worked out. I'm glad those renovations didn't happen, and I didn't spend all that money and time doing it. because I was going to start doing it myself, and I'm super glad I didn't do
Oh,
that.
yeah, no, you
Then
just saved yourself a whole other headache right there.
So I'm hoping in about a month and a half that we're going to have a lot of content, and you're just going to be hearing a lot more from us. And I'm hoping really to start doing more of just like my tutorials while I'm working on stuff, just hanging
Yeah.
out with me. A lot of people like that. I'm
Yes.
probably not very interesting to listen to while I'm working, because I'm like, oh, why did I do that? Like when I'm working on
Yeah.
cookies, I probably say bad words, which I try not to, but sometimes when I'm working and
Sometimes.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I do plan to do more cookies and stuff. So maybe just while I'm, more natural stuff rather than produced stuff. So
Yeah.
people have seemed to want that. So we'll see how that works out.
They like a live show and the interaction, and they'd be able to actually talk to you. It's like having that, personal conversation, which is always nice, and folks seem to enjoy it quite a bit. So I gotta ask, and I ask this of everyone that comes and hangs out on my show, what is your favorite horror movie?
That's easy for me to answer. Well, there's a lot of them. We'll be here all night. But I always have to go with Slumber Party Massacre 2.
Nice.
I love, 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 love that movie. I wouldn't say that it's like the greatest horror movie. I'm not saying that by any means.
Right.
I'm just saying that I love that movie. It's been one of my favorite movies. It's been my favorite movie since I was a preteen. It all started because I have fond memories of it. My friends and I went to a movie store. My friend said, haven't you always just wanted to rent a movie like this? And we just grabbed one, and that's what it happened to be. And we were like, this is the greatest movie that we have ever seen, because it's a guy and his weapon of choice is a guitar with a drill on the end of it. And it just changed everything for me when I saw that. I'm like, this is the best thing I've ever seen.
It's so good.
And I immediately was obsessed with the trilogy. When I saw that, I had never laughed so hard in my life. I immediately had to show everyone I knew that movie. They were like, this is the worst movie I've ever seen. Why are you obsessed with it? And I just had to keep singing its praises. Every birthday I had ever since then, I made everybody watch it. Even to this day, I'll run into people and they'll say, oh, I remember that birthday party you had. Like when you turned 17, you made us watch this stupid movie where like all these girls took off their tops, and then a guy came in and he looked like Elvis, and he had a guitar and it had a drill on it. And so I just think it's such, I think it's a good gateway horror movie for people that hate horror movies. I make them watch that movie.
It's very campy and fun.
I think it's also, there were some great practical effects in it.
Yes.
Especially the face exploding in the bathroom.
Yes.
The drill going through Matt's chest. I think that looked really great. I'm not saying by any means that it's the greatest horror movie ever. For me, I just love the movie. It brings me a lot of joy. It's brought me a lot of joy since I was a preteen. I never thought that I would actually have Fright Rags merchandise of it. I had to buy like the whole collection. I was on like a no spend policy, and I saw that. I'm like, nope, buying everything.
There goes that out the window.
Yeah. So, and just the fact that like when I was horror hosting, I actually I had been doing it in Visalia, and I did it in Hanford in Central California. And then I started moving to Fresno for that. And one of the local news stations actually asked me to come on. And the first one that I showed in Fresno was Slumber Party Massacre 2. And it was awesome. Like, it was this big like milestone moment in my life that I was going on the morning news at 6 a.m. to talk about showing horror movies in locally and horror hosting.
Yeah.
And I was sitting there, and they were doing like the little teasers, before I go on. And they were talking about, up next we have, a horror host is coming on talking about, a movie night that's coming up. And it was showing the driller killer doing his little dance. And I was just like, I wish I could go back in time and tell myself that like I'd be going on the news to talk about how much I love this
just
movie,
spread
and
the
that,
love.
I'm showing it, and that like 100 people showed up to watch it. Like I don't know, it was just so funny to like see that, and that it came to that. But I would say like for some of my other favorite movies, William Castle is my favorite director of all time. So The Tingler is like one of my other top favorite movies. Straight Jacket's another top favorite.
Nice.
Night of the Creeps, other top favorite movie. Dead and Buried, I already mentioned that one.
All very good flicks. And if you guys haven't seen any of these yet, what is wrong with you? There's on a streaming service, or you can find them somewhere. Go watch them and get a little education.
Yeah, The Tingler. Oh, that's such a great one. And
oh my God, I forgot about that. Wow. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on and for chatting with us this evening. Just to kind of show you guys real quick where you can find Kaci. Check her out at thehomicidalhomemaker.com, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Where else are you? You're everywhere.
Yeah, I'm kind of everywhere. Roku, Amazon Fire TV, on Screenbox. I have a TikTok, but I'm not very good about updating it, but I'm hoping to change that. I feel like that's kind of an age thing. I was like, maybe I'm just too old for TikTok and don't get it, but I think it's changed. I guess it's not a duet thing anymore. I thought at first you were supposed to lip sync, which there's no way in heck I'm going to do that. But maybe I'll get more acquainted with TikTok, but I am on there. So Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, I don't know. I have a Twitch, but I don't do too much on there right now, but hopefully that'll change. Maybe you'll see me start to stream some games on there again.
Nice. There you go. Well, thank you again. Thank you so much for coming on. Thank you guys for tuning in. I'm going to make sure that I link some of your videos and, of course, your page and everything. I'll put that all in the description box for those of you watching that would like direct links to make your lives a little easier.
Well, thanks for having me. I had a blast.
Thank you so much. And thank you guys for watching. Until next time, boys and girls, make sure you keep it spooky. Bye.